The Stranger in the Dark. On a late, cold night in Washington State, Emma was working her shift at a lonely highway diner. The place was mostly empty, with just a few customers scattered around. The weak neon lights flickered, casting an eerie glow that made the air feel heavier. She pushed a coffee cup across the counter, trying to suppress the fatigue creeping up on her, when a man entered. He was Nolan, the only other person in the diner at that hour. He sat at the counter, his dark eyes locked on Emma. At first, he simply ordered a black coffee, but soon after, his strange questions began to flow. "Bet this job gets pretty boring, huh?" he asked, his voice calm but unsettling. "Do you ever feel lonely working these late hours?" Emma forced a smile, trying to keep the conversation light, but his gaze felt like it was digging into her soul. His questions grew stranger, as if he knew intimate details about her life, things she had never shared with anyone. A cold shiver ran down her spine. Finally, when Emma was done with her shift and ready to leave, the night seemed darker than before. She stepped outside, her breath visible in the air, but when she got to her car, she noticed the tire was flat. A sigh escaped her lips, and she turned to look back at the diner, which now seemed more like a ghostly shadow in the night. As she walked back toward her car, Emma froze. Nolan was standing right behind her, his smile wide and eerie. His dark eyes never blinked. "I can help you with that flat tire," he said, his tone too calm, too smooth. "It's no trouble." Emma took a step back, a sense of dread seeping into her. She didn't want him anywhere near her car. But with no other option, she reluctantly agreed. Nolan crouched next to the tire and began to inspect it. Just then, a chilling sensation washed over Emma, as if someone or something was watching her. Before she could react, Nolan quickly turned around, his smile twisted into something far too wide. In the blink of an eye, he smashed the window with a sharp object. The sound of shattering glass echoed in the stillness of the night. Nolan reached in, grabbed her phone from the seat, and without saying a word, fled into the dark, disappearing as quickly as he had appeared. Emma scrambled for her own phone and called the police, but by the time they arrived, Nolan was long gone. They searched for him, but there were no traces, no clues. It was as if he had never existed. Days passed, but Emma couldn't shake the feeling that Nolan was still out there, watching her. She didn't know who he was, how he knew about her, or why he had done what he did, but she couldn't help but feel that his presence was still lingering, like a shadow in the dark.
Story 2.
The late shift? Beth had worked the late shift at the diner for years, getting used to the slow hours and odd clientele that came in when the world outside was asleep. The neon sign buzzed faintly in the window, casting a red glow over the empty booths, the steady hum of the coffee machine the only sound that broke the silence. It was the perfect job for a woman like Beth, who liked her privacy and solitude. On this particular night, around midnight, a man and a younger woman entered the diner. The man was in his mid-40s, with a disheveled appearance, his clothes a bit too worn, his hair unkempt. The woman, much younger, looked out of place beside him, as though she didn't quite belong in his company. Beth gave them her usual polite greeting and led them to a booth near the back. The man immediately struck up a conversation with her. He was overly friendly, talking at length about nothing in particular. She nodded and smiled, doing her best to seem interested while taking their order. He seemed to linger on strange details, asking her if she lived alone. When Beth confirmed that she did, the man's eyes seemed to linger just a little too long. It wasn't enough to make her feel threatened, but there was something unsettling about his questions, almost as if he were memorizing everything she said. After some awkward small talk, they finished their meal and left. Beth watched them from the diner window as they walked down the street, the man's voice still audible as he laughed and spoke to the woman. The interaction seemed harmless, but something in the pit of her stomach told her it wasn't over. Around 1 a.m., as Beth was cleaning up the counter, she heard a frantic knocking at her door. She froze. Her heart rate quickened as she went to the door, her hand gripping the knob. When she opened it, she found the young woman from the diner standing there, her face pale and panic-stricken. "Please, you have to help me," the woman gasped, eyes wide with fear. "There's a man, a creepy man. He's following me." Beth barely had time to react before she noticed the man from the diner coming down the street, walking slowly toward her house. His face was obscured by the dim light, but she could see the unmistakable form of him, the same man who had asked her if she lived alone. The young woman's voice trembled as she begged, "Please, he's been following me for a while, and I don't know what to do. He's dangerous." Without thinking, Beth slammed the door shut, locking it immediately. She backed away, her pulse racing. Her thoughts were a blur, but her instincts screamed for her to stay quiet, stay hidden. She rushed to the window and peered through the blinds, watching as the man continued his slow approach toward the house. Beth's mind raced. She had to do something. She ran to the neighbors' doors, but there was no answer from anyone. It was as if the whole building had emptied out. Panic crept in as she realized she was alone, completely isolated. Just then, a knock came at her stairway door. The sound was low and hollow, echoing in the quiet house. Beth's heart skipped a beat, her breath hitching in her chest. She cautiously approached the door, her hand resting on the knob. "Who is it?" she called out, her voice shaking. The reply sent a chill through her veins. "Your blood on me." Beth's heart stopped. She recoiled, adrenaline flooding her system. Her mind went into overdrive. She had to act, had to protect herself. She dialed 911, her hands trembling as she spoke to the dispatcher, describing the situation as calmly as she could. The voice on the other end reassured her that help was on the way. Terrified, Beth found a hiding spot in the back of her apartment, clutching the phone. Minutes passed like hours, but finally, the sound of sirens pierced the silence, and police arrived at the building. They took statements, searched the area, but the man was gone. The next day, Beth was still shaken. She hadn't slept a wink. As she was speaking to her upstairs neighbor, the woman pulled her aside and pointed to the stairway door. There, written in smeared red paint, were the words, "Thanks for the service, Beth." Beth's blood ran cold. It was him, the man who had been following the young woman, the man who had been watching her. In the days that followed, Beth couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't safe, that she was being watched from the shadows. The horror of the night replayed over and over in her mind. It wasn't just the encounter with the man. It was the message, the knowledge that someone had been so close, so dangerously close. By the end of the week, Beth had made up her mind. She packed up her belongings, left the diner job, and moved out of the building, seeking a fresh start far from that small, haunted neighborhood. The fear, however, never truly left her. Every time she heard a knock at her door, her heart skipped a beat. And every time she glanced out the window, she wondered if the man was still out there, watching her from the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike again.
Story 3.
The Man in the Diner. It was another typical day for 15-year-old Alex, working his usual shift at the diner in upstate New York. The diner was a cozy spot, frequented by locals and tourists alike, and Alex enjoyed the rhythm of the place, even if the late-night shifts could get tiring. He'd been serving coffee and clearing tables for a few weeks, and though the work was simple, it allowed him to save up for a car. Around mid-afternoon, as the diner began to quiet down, a strange man walked in. He was unkempt, with a scruffy beard and ragged clothes, and he looked out of place in the otherwise warm, family-oriented diner. The man glanced around before his eyes settled on Alex. "Hey, kid," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "Can you tell me where the bathroom is?" Alex nodded, pointing toward the back of the diner. "Just down the hall." The man grunted a thank you and walked away, his heavy footsteps echoing in the otherwise quiet room. There was something unsettling about the way he had looked at Alex, though. It wasn't just casual curiosity. It felt as if he were studying him, memorizing every detail. But Alex shook it off. It was probably just his nerves acting up. The rest of his shift passed uneventfully. By the time the sun began to set, Alex was wrapping up and preparing to head home. But before he left, he stopped at the counter for a quick meal. As he sat down to eat, he noticed the man again. He was sitting in a corner booth, staring directly at him from across the diner. His eyes were cold, almost unblinking, fixed on Alex with an intensity that made him feel exposed. Alex quickly looked down at his food, trying not to make eye contact. The man didn't seem to be ordering anything, just watching. After a few moments of uncomfortable silence, Alex decided it was time to leave. But as he got up and grabbed his jacket, he glanced out the window. To his shock, the man was standing outside, right across the street, still staring at him. His heart raced. "That's weird," Alex muttered to himself, but he brushed it off. He had a lot of things to worry about. But as he drove home later that evening, the feeling of unease never left him. The roads were quiet, and the streetlights flickered as he made his way down the familiar route. Then, as he approached a red light at the intersection near his neighborhood, he saw something that made his blood run cold. The same man was standing on the corner, staring directly at Alex as he waited for the light to change. Alex's grip tightened around the steering wheel, his pulse quickening. The man didn't move. He just stood there, his eyes fixed on him, like he knew exactly where Alex was going. The light turned green, and Alex slammed his foot on the gas, desperate to get away. When he pulled into his driveway a few minutes later, Alex's stomach churned. The house was empty. His parents weren't home yet. He got out of the car, but as he walked up to the porch, something made him stop dead in his tracks. Through the window of his front door, he saw the man again, standing in his front yard, staring up at him. His face was pressed up against the window, his eyes wide open and unblinking, as if he were waiting for Alex to come closer. Alex's breath caught in his throat. Panic surged through him, and he rushed inside, locking the door behind him. He grabbed his phone and called 911, his voice shaking with fear. "There's a man outside my house. He's been following me all day. Please, you have to send someone," Alex cried. The police arrived quickly, scouring the yard and the area around the house, but they found nothing. The man had disappeared without a trace. They told Alex to be vigilant and assured him they'd keep an eye on things, but deep down, Alex knew something wasn't right. The man hadn't just vanished. He'd been watching, waiting, and he wasn't finished. That night, Alex lay awake in his bed. The image of the man's cold stare burned into his mind. He tried to convince himself it was all in his head, but every time he closed his eyes, he felt as though the man was still out there, watching, waiting for the perfect moment to return.